Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel for more exciting videos. The studio lights of Susanna Reid's morning show glowed brighter than usual that day, but something in the air felt dim, heavy, uncertain, uneasy. It was supposed to be just another broadcast. The cameras rolled, the producers signaled, and Susanna, as always, sat poised behind the desk, calm, composed, and effortlessly professional. Millions of viewers tuned in, expecting warmth, intelligence, and that familiar smile that had greeted them for years. But not every moment on live television goes as planned. Midway through the segment, during what should have been a light-hearted discussion, a guest, someone invited for commentary, leaned forward and made a remark that sliced through the room like glass. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't shouted, but it carried a weight that stunned everyone. A comment. A careless, cruel remark about her appearance, about her skin. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The crew behind the cameras exchanged nervous glances. The co-host shifted uncomfortably. The audience at home, though miles away, could feel it too, the sudden change in tone, the silence that followed words that should never have been spoken. But Susanna Reid did not crumble. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. Instead, she did something far more powerful. She stayed still. Her eyes, steady and unshaken, met the guest's gaze. In that moment, she held not just her composure, but her dignity. The silence stretched, not awkward anymore, but meaningful. It demanded reflection. Then she spoke, calmly, clearly, firmly. Words matter, she said, her voice unwavering. And so does respect. It wasn't a dramatic speech. It wasn't filled with anger. But it carried truth, raw, undeniable truth. The kind that makes people listen, whether they want or not. The guest, suddenly stripped of confidence, stumbled over an apology. But the damage had already been done. Not just to Susanna, but to every viewer who had ever faced judgment because of how they looked, where they came from, or who they were. Yet, what happened next was something no one expected. Instead of letting the moment define her in pain, Susanna transformed it. She shifted the conversation, not away from the issue, but deeper into it. She spoke about respect, about diversity, about the responsibility that comes with having a voice on public platforms. She didn't just defend herself, she stood for countless others. And in doing so, she turned an insult into a message. A message of strength, a message of grace. A message that echoed far beyond the studio walls. By the time the segment ended, something had changed. Not just in the room, but in the hearts of those watching. Social media lit up, not with outrage alone, but with admiration. Viewers praised her composure, her courage, her refusal to be reduced by someone else's ignorance. Later that evening, as the studio lights dimmed and the cameras shut off, Susanna sat quietly for a moment. The day had tested her, but it had not broken her. If anything, it had revealed something deeper. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes, it is found in restraint. In choosing dignity over anger. In standing tall when others try to bring you down. Susanna Reid walked out of that studio not as a victim of an insult, but as a symbol of resilience. And for those who watched, one thing became clear: respect isn't optional. And neither is standing up for what is right. The quiet of the studio corridor felt almost surreal after the intensity of the broadcast. Walked slowly, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, each step echoing the weight of what had just happened. Behind her, the usual buzz of production had softened into hushed conversations. People weren't just discussing the show, they were processing it. Inside the dressing room, Susanna finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She sat before the mirror, the same mirror where she had prepared countless times before, adjusting her hair, perfecting her makeup, readying her smile. But today, the reflection staring back at her carried something different. Not weakness, not hurt, but depth. She gently removed her earpiece, placing it on the table with careful precision. Her hands were steady, but her mind was alive with thoughts. The words spoken on air replayed themselves, not as wounds, but as reminders of how casually harm can be delivered, and how powerfully it can be challenged. There was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she said. One of the producers stepped inside, her face filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Susanna paused for a moment before answering. "I'm fine," she said, offering a small, reassuring smile. And in many ways, she meant it. Because something had shifted, not just around her, but within her. Moments later, her phone buzzed. Then buzzed again, and again. Messages poured in, friends, colleagues, viewers. Some were angry on her behalf. Others were supportive, grateful even, for how she had handled the situation. One message read, "You said what so many of us wish we could say in moments like that." She stared at that message a little longer than the others. Because it was true. So many people don't get that moment, the chance to respond with clarity, with strength, with an audience listening. So many carry those moments in silence. But she hadn't, and that mattered. Later that day, a meeting was quietly arranged. The network executives wanted to address what had happened. Not for damage control, but for accountability. The guest's remark had crossed a line, and lines, once crossed publicly, cannot simply be erased. Inside the meeting room, the atmosphere was serious but respectful. Susanna listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, her words were measured. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about what we allow to go unchallenged." There was no anger in her tone, just conviction. The room fell silent, not out of discomfort, but out of agreement. Decisions were made. Policies would be reinforced. Conversations about respect, representation, and responsibility would not just be discussed, they would be acted upon. And just like that, a moment that began with disrespect was reshaping something much larger. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Susanna found herself walking outside, away from the studio, away from the lights. The city moved around her as usual, cars passing, people talking, life continuing. But she felt a quiet sense of clarity. She wasn't defined by what had been said to her. She was defined by how she responded. The next morning, when she returned to the studio, there was a different kind of energy waiting for her. Not tension, but respect. Real, visible respect. Her co-host greeted her warmly. The crew smiled a little more openly. Even the atmosphere felt lighter, as though something important had been acknowledged and understood. When the cameras went live again, Susanna sat in her chair, just as she always had. Calm, professional, unshaken, but there was something new behind her eyes, a quiet fire. Not the kind that burns wildly, but the kind that stays steady. The kind that lights the way for others. As the show unfolded, she carried on, not ignoring what had happened, but rising above it. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching of something simple, yet powerful. Dignity is a choice. Strength is a choice. The days that followed carried a ripple effect no one in the studio could have fully predicted. What began as a single uncomfortable moment on live television had grown into a wider conversation, one that stretched far beyond the walls of the newsroom. For the attention wasn't something she chased, but it was something she understood. Influence, she knew, came with responsibility. Invitations began to arrive, panels, interviews, discussions about media ethics and respect. At first, she hesitated. Not because she was unsure of what to say, but because she didn't want the narrative to become about fame or spectacle. This wasn't a headline to her. It was a reality many people quietly lived through. Still, she agreed to speak. In one interview, when asked how she managed to stay so composed, she paused thoughtfully before answering. Because losing composure would have given that moment more power than it deserved, she said. Sometimes strength isn't reacting, it's choosing how you respond. Her words resonated. Across social media, people began sharing their own experiences, stories of small comments, subtle insults, and moments where they had felt diminished. But alongside those stories came something else, courage. People were not just remembering pain, they were reclaiming their voices. Back at the studio, a quiet transformation was underway. Workshops were introduced. Conversations became more open. There was a renewed awareness, an understanding that words spoken on air don't disappear when the cameras stop rolling. They linger. They shape perspectives. They leave marks. One afternoon, a young intern approached Susanna, her expression nervous but determined. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she said softly. "What you did, it mattered." Susanna smiled, not with pride, but with